Okay, welcome to the Nick and No. The Nick and Joe.
You flubbed
show.
that one, man.
I dropped that
What
like
do you
an
talk-
atom bomb.
What do you mean the Nick and No? Okay, I'm only going to think I will accept that as a compliment, Nick, only in the context of Dr. No. And I know that Dr. No was evil.
Yes,
okay?
he was.
He was supposed to be an evil bad guy in Dr. No. Let me just think. Dr. No, I think, was the first James Bond movie.
Yes, it was.
The first James
or was
Bond
that
movie.
Goldfinger?
No, Goldfinger was the third or the fourth.
Okay.
Yeah, he was already in. So there was Dr. No, and then there was Thunderball, and then I think there was Goldfinger.
Okay. You know, it's funny, but because we were talking a little bit about what the best written shows of their era were, and of all the franchises that have been out there, the James Bond franchise has been the longest and most enduring. It's had the most different James Bonds. Now they've gone with a female lesbian for the lead.
Well, not yet. They haven't. They're talking about it. They're talking about that, but the next James Bond movie that's due to be released early sometime in 2020 is still with Daniel Craig. So it's still the old-fashioned, misogynist, single, drink-loving, hard-drinking, hard-partying, male, He-Man,
But that's who
masculine
Bond is.
James Bond. Well, that's the character, of course, yes.
That's
and I
who-
was, if anyone has ever read the Ian Fleming books, the original James Bond books by Ian Fleming, and I have. I was a very big James Bond book fan, so I read all of Ian Fleming's books, and then I read after, of course, he died and stopped writing them, and the franchise was taken over. The books, I should say, were taken over by John Gardner, and I don't know what happened with John Gardner, but there was a gap between Ian Fleming and John Gardner, and John Gardner wrote a handful of the books, and then afterwards I lost interest. So,
well, they changed character, didn't they?
well, they didn't change the character in the
No.
books, but
Okay.
in the movies, yeah, they did,
They did, yeah.
and
Like,
several times.
there's two James Bonds that I have I guess I grew up with. I caught the tail end of Sean Connery, who I think most people would say is the iconic James Bond.
That is true. I
And
agree
the
with
other
that.
one is he played the Saint.
Roger Moore.
Yes, Roger
Yeah,
Moore.
I didn't like Roger Moore in that
A
role.
lot of people didn't.
I didn't
but
like
I didn't know
Roger.
any different.
George Lazenby played one on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yes, I remember
he
that.
He was pretty good. I liked him, but
Yeah.
for whatever reason, they only gave him that one. And then now his name escapes me, but there was another fellow. There was George Lazenby, and then there was Roger Moore, and then there was another fellow who did 2 episodes of James Bond. And then they replaced him, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name. But I thought he was pretty good. I thought that James Bond was as close to the book version as any, including Sean Connery. And then they replaced him with Pierce Brosnan.
Yes.
And
Who
then
didn't do a
following
bad job.
Pierce Brosnan, well, I didn't like Pierce Brosnan in the role. I liked the movies, but I didn't particularly care for him in the role. And then they brought Daniel Craig in, and I think Daniel Craig has been pretty good as well.
Is he the blonde
very
guy?
close. Yeah, he's the latest guy. He's been very close to the James Bond of the books, and I liked it when they moved away from the high-tech space travel and all that stuff. I thought that was just kooky stuff.
Yeah,
anyway, September 11th, 2019. I want to talk a little bit about, Nick, the anniversary. Today's the 18th anniversary of the attacks on the World Trade Center in New
blows
York
my
and
mind.
the Pentagon. But before we do that, we have to talk a little bit about the official kickoff of the unofficial election campaign that's been going on all summer long.
Yeah.
And I don't, I know that people like this fixed election date business, but the problem is that, we have a writ of elections, and that's how our system works. So
Right.
Parliament has to be officially dissolved by the Governor General, who is the representative of the Queen, and the Governor General then issues a writ of election, and the law is that the writ has to be, the election period has to be for a minimum of 35 days. So today's 40 days. I don't know why the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, went to the Governor General and asked him to dissolve Parliament officially today to officially commence the election campaign. I think it's very odd. We all expected he was going to do it on the Sunday. But anyway, so we're off to the races. Now, I was driving down the road with one of my colleagues today, and we were listening to Elizabeth May's press conference on CBC Radio. Don't shoot me. Don't shoot me. They were covering this stuff. And I was a passenger. I was a passenger in the car, so you can't blame me. In any event, Nick, what really struck me was when Elizabeth May was talking about Quebec separatism and candidates in Quebec and whether or not they were going to be, loyal to Canada, etc. She started talking a little bit about, and by the way, she prefaced all of this stuff with, I want to acknowledge that we are holding this press conference on unceded land belonging to this nation and that nation.
I hear that one more time.
Which I kind of, I don't like it, but I understand why they're doing it. But the problem is, of course, and I know we're really going down a rabbit hole here, so I'm not going to go further down than this, but just to say this, that land may have been unceded by those nations, but I guarantee you that there was a previous nation that the land was taken from, and they didn't cede it either.
No.
So, we could go down the unceded rabbit hole for, I would expect, probably many, many nations in many, many locations. But that's neither here nor there.
Right.
No, the funny thing was that when she was talking about this, she stopped herself, and then she wanted to say, we're proud Canadians, we're etc. We're citizens of this country, and but she stopped herself and decided that she'd be really politically correct. She wanted to say, well, first of all, we're citizens of the world. I assume that's what she wanted to say. Of like a John Lennon, Imagine, can't we all come together type of kumbaya
all
thing, right?
All we're saying is give peace a chance.
That's something like that, right?
Yeah.
And but what she said was, I think it's important to know, first of all, that at least from all of us in the Green Party, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, we're all earthlings.
So we've
now, if I had been driving, I would have driven off the road. What? We're all You mean Green Party members are earthlings? What about the rest of us?
We've had the rumor confirmed that the Green Party actually does come from the planet Earth.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. They
and
are.
We have that from the best sources.
100%, Nick. 100%. They are earthlings, and the rest of us, especially in the government, are not.
We are the government. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile.
Okay,
that's pretty much the size of it.
Yes, and if you get a chance to listen to the whole press conference, I'm sure it's online somewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, please do, because it is the lunatic show, and not because of the quality of the press conference, but the promises that they're making. We're going to eliminate fossil fuel. All cars are going to be electric. I don't recall them saying a date, but and we're no more fracking, no more exploration. And I'm going to go down now. Here's the funny part: we are not going to have foreign oil coming into this country anymore. I will go down and talk to those guys at the Irving refinery and stop them from bringing in oil from human rights abusing Saudi Arabia, and replace it. We are going to replace that with Hibernia oil. And this is
Somehow
30. This is about this is sort of in the context of we're going to get rid of all oil and just go to electricity, okay? And then we're going to create millions of jobs because we don't actually have the generating capacity or the distribution network for this, and so we have to create the generating capacity and we have to create the distribution network.
Yes.
Okay, and that's going to create millions of jobs. So presumably, the guys that have been working in the oil fields for 50 years and are on, they're 40 years and they're getting close to retirement. They're going to be heading off to. They're going to be linemen for the county. How's that Glenn Campbell song?
Campbell.
I am a lineman for the county. Hey, we should do a music show. You and
I don't think we'd have very many.
No, that was pretty good. We were pretty good there.
Yeah, hey, listen.
We were pretty good.
I'll take the harmony. You do the melody,
or something like that. Anyway, so we're off and running, and we're not going to bore you guys with the election campaign tonight because we're just waiting for more fodder from all of the candidates and the political parties, and I guarantee you they're going to give us fodder.
And
So
we will make great use of it.
we absolutely will. But as I said tonight is the 18th anniversary of the attacks on the World Trade Center and on the Pentagon in England. Now, what am I saying? Good grief.
New York.
In Washington. Washington is where the Pentagon. And, I thought it would be interesting to just have a, talk. And by the way, if you want to participate in the conversation through our live chat, just click on the chat bubble on the player. And you may have to register. That's to make sure you're a real person, not a robot or a bot or whatever they call it these days.
Or a Green Party member. Oh, no, they're allowed. They're Earthlings.
Yeah, they're Earthlings.
Yeah.
We're not Earthlings. That's the implication. So I'd be interested to hear, Nick, where were you when you heard about the attacks? Tell me.
Actually, I heard about it about 24 hours before I actually saw the video footage. I was over at a friend of mine. We were splitting up firewood for his winter supply, and my wife called and said, there's something going on in New York. And I can't tell you what my first initial reaction was because I forget. I probably just a shrug of the shoulders thinking there's always something going on in New York, not realizing, the size and scope of the event. We started to listen to it on the radio, and all of a sudden it became clear that this is a lot more than just, a holdup in downtown New York. First of all, because if it was just that, why are we hearing about it? And secondly, people don't normally fly airliners into tall buildings with a full load of fuel and a full load of passengers. It was so outside our thinking. We've heard about the Lockerbie bombing, and we'd heard about, the Air India situation, those kinds of things. But never has an airplane been used like a missile. And it was 24 hours later, and I remember being totally gobsmacked. It was more when the Challenger exploded on takeoff. I can tell you I was in the main cafeteria of the Saguenay, and we had it on TV, and everybody just stood there not knowing what to say, hardly believing our eyes. And it's the only thing I can think of that was more profound than that. Because here you have an event that the whole world is tuned in on, watching these buildings collapse. And I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theories about this tower and that tower. I'll just tell you, I don't believe in those conspiracy theories. There's a whole bunch of reasons why, but and you want to comment on those, fine, go ahead. But I don't believe in wasting my time with that. If 19 guys flying airplanes into buildings and killing 3,000 people isn't a big enough conspiracy for you, I don't know what is. So it was one of those deals where it was just, you stood there in a shocked silence while you watched it unfold. Or in my case, when I first heard it on the radio, like, what is going on? Nobody knew. So that's where I was at the time.
So I was when I was driving my children to school, and we're driving down the road, and we hear, get in the car early in the morning, and the news is, breaking news, that this plane has flown into the World Trade Center. Now, it may be a bit of a surprise to people, Nick, but the truth is this is not the first time this has happened. It may be the first time it happened with the World Trade Center,
right? But
it was 2, maybe 3 times that planes flew into the Empire State Building.
Yeah, but those are accidental.
Okay, yeah, no, but you see, this is my point. My point is that when we heard at first that a plane had flown into the World Trade Center, my first thought was, well, it's one of these accidents. It's a tragic accident, and you say a prayer. You hope that people are not injured or dying.
Right.
Didn't understand the scope of it because I think everything was still pretty sketchy. We didn't know how large an airplane it was.
Yeah, there was lots we didn't
first.
know.
So anyway, that was at first. So we're driving down the road, and we're just coming up to the school, and I was listening. I think it was Steve Madeley on CFRA in Ottawa was talking about it at the time, and he said that there was another plane had flown into the World Trade Center. And instantly at that moment, I realized it's a terrorist attack.
Yeah.
Had to be. You're
Yeah.
not going to have two planes fly into
With
the World
with
Trade
the kind
Center
of control they
twice.
have over airspace
Sure.
these days, not going to happen.
So I immediately knew that this was a terrorist attack. Dropped the children off of school, and I was working on Parliament Hill at the time. Drove downtown, parked, went into the office, and of course this was all people were talking about. And that's when we heard that there had been a plane that had flown into the Pentagon. So we realized, and now they're talking about how many planes are out there that are being hijacked and turned into these missiles. So that became not just the talk, but the fear, the real fear about how widespread this was. And within minutes, there were rumors going around about planes coming and flying into Ottawa. So people were, evacuating their buildings.
Right.
And I remember clearly we were sitting, I myself and a few colleagues were sitting around the table, and they were sort of asking me what this meant. And I said, well, gentlemen, this is, mark this day and this moment. You'll remember it because everything has changed in this moment. This is an act of war. I don't know who has done this, but this is an act of war, and the Americans for sure will not respond to this. And the question will be,
happened.
are we going to respond to it as well as allies of the Americans under the North Atlantic Treaty Organization?
And as a member of the
And
United
of course,
Nations.
as NORAD as well. This is an attack from the air. This was absolutely integral to our defense agreements through NORAD, the North American Air
it's what
Defense
it's designed.
Treaty.
Well, no, I was going to say it's what it's designed to defend against. Yet at the same time, no one would ever perceive of the idea of using civilian aircraft on this scale the way that they were used.
Right.
That's not what our defenses were designed against.
You're quite right, absolutely. But still, I'm saying we were engaged militarily, whether we
Yes.
liked it or not.
That's right.
Now, so that's what happened with us. And of course, people were evacuated from down, and people were in a state of shock. I mean, they were in a state of shock, absolutely. Now, as a bit of an aside, not on the day of, but I guess it must have been about a week later, we held a memorial for the victims of 9/11 here in Ottawa. I mean, we held the memorial here in Ottawa. And by the way, there were a number of Canadians that were killed in the World
Over
Trade
200.
Center. So I think that's worth bearing in mind. So we had a memorial, and the number of people that turned out on Parliament Hill and around Parliament Hill for this memorial was estimated to be somewhere in the order of 100,000. I had personally never seen so many people show up, and quiet, somber mood, etc. It was very impressive. And I have to say, I can't help but be a little critical. But at that time, at such an important time, at such a spiritual time where people are coming together, the government under Prime Minister Chrétien at the time refused to allow any mention of God in their memorial service.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that was quite controversial. And to this day, when I think about it, I think, how could you do such a thing? When people want, to reach out, to think about those issues, spiritual issues, irrespective of whether they're explicitly religious or not. I mean, these are your citizens who are struggling. They want to know. And here is an ostensibly Catholic, religious, observant person essentially saying, no, we're not going to allow any kind of religious expression at this memorial service. And I thought that there's something fundamentally not just wrong, but weird, absurd.
It's obscene. It's
just
probably not too strong a word. Now, one of the things that I remember from that particular period within a day or two of the attack was the impact it had on travel in North America. Everything from Gander, Newfoundland, all over North America, airplanes were being put anywhere you could stack them, because one of the facts of modern aviation is there's not enough runway, available runway to put all the airplanes on the ground at the same time. Our air transportation system depends on a certain number of airplanes in the air 24 7 so that the air traffic controller has some place to put these airplanes for diversionary reasons. Let's say there's an emergency or, an in-flight emergency, an engine out or something like that. So when these tiny little airports all of a sudden started to receive aircraft of all kinds, the kind of flexibility, and it wasn't just the example I have in mind is Gander, Newfoundland, but it wasn't just them. It was all over North America. People opened up their homes, they opened up their businesses, they went out of their way to assist the flying public in making sure that they were safe and well looked after. Now I wonder, first of all, that was remarkable in and of itself. But the other thing that, thinking about that today, was what have we learned since then? What lessons did we take from that, and how have they been applied? Well, because like everybody else in North America, or in many parts around the world, not just North America, they always close the door after the horse is gone. It's like if you remember the shoe bomber. Well, the next thing you know, you're not allowed to take jellied paste on a whole range of restrictions, and it's all counter after the fact.
Well, I think that's normal, don't you think, Nick?
It is normal, but it's not. It's normal, and it's even logical, but it doesn't make any sense from a security point of view, because they're not going to use the same. Most of the time, they don't use the same tactic twice. So all you're doing is piling on extra regulations on top of the commuting public or the traveling public,
right?
But don't really bear any fruit.
Yeah, but the problem, of course, is that once they've done it once, if you don't take measures to prevent them from using the same tactics and techniques a second time, they will use it until you put a stop to it. So there is a compelling logic to reactive measures in that sense. But that is, for me, that's the big change. Other than, sort of, if I could use the term macro change, that would be a way that I would describe, the fact that, we fought a war in Afghanistan.
A long, bloody war.
Okay. And fighting is still going on. And the aftermath of the conflict that was precipitated by these attacks in Iraq and in Afghanistan, that aftermath is still going on. People have strong views as to whether or not the Americans and we also, to the degree that we participated in Afghanistan, whether or not those were the right decisions to make. That's not the time. Now is not the time for us to have that discussion. It's a separate discussion altogether.
Right.
But aside from that, in terms of just the practical, in-your-face changes, the security at the borders and at airports in particular are the big change for me. The idea of having to take your shoes off, standing in line for as long as we have to. Even today, if I don't, sometimes I have my security pass at Parliament Hill. Sometimes I don't. It depends on whether or not I'm working there. And from the times that I go, and I have a meeting on Parliament Hill, but I don't have a pass because I'm just coming in for a meeting and I'm not actually working there, so I have to go through security. I have to go through metal detectors, etc. And, simple things like I have to remove my belt. I always have to remove my belt. And it's funny because I don't always have to remove my belt at the airport, and you'd think that security would be tighter at the airport than at Parliament Hill, but there you have it.
Well, the other thing, excuse me, and for the most part, we've kind of accepted these changes as part of daily life now. Like nobody, they understand you have to have a passport to cross the American border between Canada and the United States, for the most part. When I was driving tractor-trailer during the 90s, I can tell you that for the 10 years that I did that, leading up to 1999, I never once showed any ID other than the manifest for the cargo that I had in the back. And I crossed at every major border crossing between Canada and the United States except for Vancouver. All the land ports, like in Ontario, I crossed at Gananoque, I crossed at the Rainbow Bridge, I crossed at Windsor, I crossed at Sarnia, all these different land ports, and never once did anyone ever say, show me some ID. It was all about the manifest. And those days are long gone. Now they have different methods of getting across the border without slowing the trade down. But it's all security. It's all security based. You have to submit yourself to a security check, get yourself I think it's called a fast pass. It's been a while since I was in the cab of a truck, so my terminology may be off a little bit. But for the most part, they've pre-screened you before you ever get to the border. And if there are any questions, then you're going to have to give some answers. But and everybody kind of just says, okay, this is this is the way it is. And I don't think many of them realize. A lot of people have forgotten what caused those changes. They think it was just all. Think of somebody who's 15 or 20.
20,
they
21,
don't remember
23.
this at all.
No, they don't. They have no memory of this.
Of course not, because I've got children younger than this. So when you look at the consequences that have flowed from 9/11, there have been profound changes, and not just crossing the border, but in the way that we look at our military. The way that we fund it, the way that we use it. If you remember Highway of Heroes, when someone was killed overseas, and all of a sudden the military was the very top of people's minds, and they took great pride in a job that our men and women at arms did. And I remember talking to some of them and saying, enjoy this time right now. Take advantage of this time, because this will not last. Within 10 or 15 years, all this warm, fuzzy feeling you have is going to be gone. And guess what? Defense is now back down where it traditionally is in people's voting mind when it comes to elections, around 10 or 11. It's not number one, not by a long shot.
Not by a long shot. We're coming up to a break here, Nick, and at the second segment, I should have said this at the top of the show, we have a special guest on the phone who will be joining us, Jack Fonseca, who's the Director of Political Operations for the pro-life organization Campaign Life Coalition. So we may be 1 or 2 minutes ahead here of our normal 30-minute break time, but we're going to go for a break now, my friends, so that we have a full 30 minutes. I know Jack's got a lot to talk about. So sit tight and stretch your legs, if you will, and we'll be back in a minute. Okay, welcome back. I'm Joe, he's Nick, and you're listening to the Nick and Joe Show. And this is the second segment of our 1 hour show for tonight, September 11th, 2019, 18th anniversary of the attacks on the World Trade Center in New York and in the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And as promised, we have on the line in this second segment tonight Jack Fonseca, who is the, correct me, Jack, you're the Director of Political Operations for Campaign Life Coalition?
You've got it correct, Joe.
Okay, see? I knew I had, they don't pay me a lot around here, but they pay me for something good.
Oh, brother. Okay.
You're probably noticing that we're already a little irreverent, but this is a serious topic, so we're going to get serious here now,
all right.
Jack. So go ahead, Nick.
All right. Well, first of all, Jack, you mentioned Campaign Life Coalition, and you are the director of, what was the title again?
Political Director
Operations.
Of Operations.
Okay. So what exactly is the Campaign Life Coalition? What's it all about, and what does it do?
Sure. Campaign Life Coalition is a national nonprofit organization. We are a pro-life and pro-family organization that is heavily involved in politics in terms of electing pro-life and pro-family candidates to all levels of government, and that includes from school board trustee to city council to mayor to provincial MPPs and MLAs to federal MPs, I should say. And we help to elect candidates provincially and federally in nomination races by recruiting memberships, getting our supporters to take out party memberships in support of nomination candidates so that they get the right to carry the party banner and eventually, hopefully, win an election and move on to advocate for our values in the House of Commons or a provincial legislature. So our and aside from the all the political stuff that we're involved in, we also do a lot of education and awareness of the life issues. For instance, we are the sole organizer of the National March for Life in Ottawa. It's an event that's been that we started. It was something like about the 20th year now we've done it, and we bring out regularly approximately 25,000 Canadians, pro-life Canadians, to the steps of Parliament Hill, where our lawmakers sit and our Prime Minister, and demand that our parliamentarians restore legal protection for children in the womb, which was taken away from them by Pierre Elliott Trudeau in 1969. We also organized the National Life Chain, which is a one-day pro-life witness across the country in more than 200 locations where people very simply hold a sign that says something like "abortion kills children" and a few other messages, and they pray on a public sidewalk on a busy street intersection for 1 hour, and so they pray and witness for an end to abortion. We also brought the 40 Days for Life campaign of prayer and fasting to end abortion. We brought that to Canada after witnessing its tremendous success in the United States in saving lives and changing hearts. So we brought it to Canada in 2007 and began with one location, and now there's dozens of locations in dozens of cities across the country in many provinces. And then we do a lot of other education, putting on seminars and training of pro-life activists, and also I should mention on the political side, to go back to that, we also influence party policy. So, for instance, we are heavily involved in the policy development process for the Conservative Party of Canada and the PC Party. By activating our supporters who are party members. So, our supporters are heavily involved and invested in party politics in Canada, and those who are party members, we engage them and educate them on what to do to influence party policy. And we've had tremendous success over the last couple of conventions in passing pro-life policy resolutions and pro-free speech resolutions and the like. So that gives you a bit of an overview of the work that Campaign Life does. We've been, it was actually founded, the organization was founded in about 37 years ago, and we are officially non-denominational. I mean, all of us who work here are Christians, so we are all guided by a Judeo-Christian worldview and a natural law understanding of the world.
Well, you just took away my next question. How long have you been around? So you answered that one really well. Let me ask you the next question, which is, if you want to, if you can, break down for us the four major parties and what their positions are as far vis-a-vis pro-life issues. And by that, I mean more than just abortion. I'm talking about euthanasia. I'm talking about, family values and all these kinds of things, the whole package. How would you break down each party?
Yeah, sure. Well, let me start with Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party, first of all. And the Justin Trudeau is a rabid abortion lover. I mean, he has not met an abortion that he didn't like. The guy, it seems that he lusts for the blood and bones of children in the womb, because I've never seen a more radically pro-abortion politician in this country in all my life. And we've described him, and others have described him as the most pro-abortion prime minister in Canada's history. And that's saying something, because the word abortion itself is a euphemism for child murder. It's a euphemism for killing children in the womb brutally. In surgical abortion, it's abortionist tears the limbs off of an unborn baby, and that's how they kill it. And in order to ensure they've a good killing, they have to reassemble the parts of the baby to make sure they didn't leave any inside the mother, which could cause infection. So this is what the Liberal Party stands for, is killing children. So extremist are they in their abortionist philosophy that Justin Trudeau actually has a policy, which he announced once he took over as leader of the party, that pro-life Canadians are not even allowed to run as candidates in the Liberal Party. So they simply, and that is a form of anti-religious discrimination. It's grotesque. What Trudeau has said in his party policy is that if you are a Canadian, if you are a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, a Sikh, or of any other faith who believes that life is sacred, you believe in the Ten Commandments, that thou shalt not kill, you are not allowed to run as a candidate in the Liberal Party. You are banned from that democratic participation in the Liberal Party, and that is totalitarian and really unbecoming of a free society. Are you still there, Nick?
Yeah, we're right here. I'm just listening. Now,
sorry,
I'm still here too, guys.
So
just want to let you know.
I'm going to let Joseph ask a couple questions too. But one of the things I want, because you're going to hear, and I'm sure you've heard it, but let me ask it so that we can check it off. A lot of people say, well, that's really over the top. You're just being sensational. You're just being outrageous. That the Liberals, that's not what they're all about. They're all about women's rights. They're all about, empowering women. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's quite a stretch of a euphemism to refer to the killing of children as a woman's right. No such right exists. A baby in the womb, let's say a female baby, a baby girl, has a separate body to the mother. So when we're talking about an abortion, the rights that are primary are the rights of that body that is being killed, that separate human being. That's the baby. So it's a bogus argument that gets thrown. That's all the progressive politicians use that lingo because it sounds nice. It sounds like they're very compassionate when they speak of women's rights. But when you lift the cover off that and look underneath, what you find is baby killing. That's what this is all about. And the Liberals embrace this with religious fervor. It's a near religious fervor, the philosophy of abortionism, because they are totally down with our culture's embrace of sexual libertinism. That the only thing that's important is how much sex you can have, and protecting your ability to have all the sex that you want to have without consequences. And that means killing babies if you become pregnant when you didn't intend to. So I totally reject the women's right euphemism. It's not contained in the Constitution. There's no right to kill children. There's no right to abortion either in the Constitution of Canada or in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and quite the opposite, in fact. There is a right to life that is mentioned at very close to the beginning of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is part of our Constitution, which speaks to a right to protect children from abortion, not to enshrine it in law.
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of the Constitution, Jack, because a lot of people out there are under the misimpression that the Supreme Court ruled in 1988 in the Morgentaler case that abortion is a constitutional right, when in fact they didn't rule that at all. They did strike down the law as it had been written, which ironically was a Pierre Trudeau liberal law. There were problems with the law the way it was written, so they struck it down. But at that time, they actually invited Parliament to draft a new abortion law that addressed the issues, the narrow issues of law on which they had ruled in Morgentaler. So not only did the Supreme Court not agree that it was a constitutional right to have an abortion, but in the decision, they went out of their way to invite Parliament explicitly to write another law to regulate abortion. But what is the situation now in Canada with respect to abortion laws? What laws are in place, if any? Because this, I think, is something that people don't really understand here in this country either.
Sure, a lot of your listeners may be quite shocked to hear this, but we are actually a lawless nation, literally a lawless nation with respect to abortion. When the Supreme Court struck down the Trudeau law, the Pierre Elliott Trudeau law in 1989, it left a vacuum where there is literally no law at all. So you are permitted by default to kill a baby for any reason or no reason at all, fully funded by the taxpayer up to the moment of birth. So you can be the baby can be 9 months less 5 minutes, and there is nothing in the law that would stop you from killing that baby, unless the only obstacle is finding an abortionist who's willing to kill a baby that late. But there's actually no legal constraints against that.
Right, and this is what we would call partial birth abortion.
Yeah, even partial birth abortion. One could argue that it is. Well, even here in Canada, because of even partial birth abortion is permitted in Canada. And that is where the baby is so large, just for the benefit of your listeners who've never heard the term partial birth abortion before. There are laws against it in the United States now, federal and state laws, but we have no such thing here in Canada. Although we did manage to get that passed as Conservative Party policy at the last convention in Halifax. But partial birth abortion is where the baby is so large, so close to delivery time, that the abortionist can't tear his or her arms and legs off and kill the baby by dismemberment, the way they normally do with smaller babies. So what they have to do is bring the baby's head out to partially deliver it, and then kill the baby in a very grotesque manner, which I'm not going to describe here, but or snipping the spinal cord, or snipping the baby's neck. So it's a grotesque thing, and there's nothing stopping it from happening, because even in Canada, our criminal code says that quite amazingly, and it's absurd, but it defines that a child does not exist until it fully exits the birth canal.
Right.
So when the baby's little toe, when the baby's tiny little toe has finally left the birth canal, voila, abracadabra, all of a sudden that thing that was non-human is now human. So
Right,
that's
a person.
what our criminal code says right now in terms of a definition of human
Right.
being.
Now you mentioned that having had some success in guiding policy with the federal Conservative Party with respect to partial birth abortion and other policy areas. Now I know you guys are nonpartisan, so you don't shill for any particular political party. As political parties, you're just interested in the issues, and it just so happens that right now the Conservative Party of Canada federally, I think it's fair to say that it is the most pro-life party, or at least it's the party that's the most open to pro-life policy and pro-life messaging of all of the federal political parties. But, here we are at September 11th. They've just finally called officially the election in Canada. It was an unofficial race was going on already. But in the last week or 10 days, you guys have had a bit of a dust-up with the Conservative Party and with its leader, Andrew Scheer.
Yeah, and let me, I'll explain what that's happened, and it stemmed from an unfortunate statement by Andrew Scheer. But if I could, I don't think I finished answering Nick's question about the run-through of all the other parties. So if I can do that real quick in 2 minutes. So
I was hoping you would.
Yeah. So sorry, Justin Trudeau, no choice but pro-choice. You're not even allowed to run as a candidate. Forget it. You're not allowed to vote your conscience. The NDP is exactly the same as Liberals. They actually screen you. In interviews, they ask you if you support abortion, if you support homosexual marriage and the whole LGBT agenda. And if you don't agree, then you're not allowed to run as a candidate. They're 100% pro-abortion, totally extremist. The Conservative Party actually allows you to be pro-life and allows you to advocate for pro-life policies at conventions. It allows you to, as MPs, to bring forward pro-life private members' bills or motions and to speak to it with member statements and things like that. And I should mention the Christian Heritage Party, although it is not a mainstream party, is 100% pro-life, whereas the Conservative Party also is open to pro-abortion people and has many pro-abortion candidates and pro-abortion MPs as well as pro-life MPs and pro-life candidates. The Christian Heritage Party, although it's not a mainstream party, is 100% pro-life and totally aligned with CLC's values and mission. Then we go to the People's Party. The People's Party is open to pro-life candidates, and although Maxime Bernier himself is not pro-life, he is very big on free speech. So he has said repeatedly that he will allow MPs, candidates in his party, to bring up any issue that's important to them on moral matters. He's not going to try and stop them. Elizabeth May and the Green Party is, again, total abortion extremists. It just came out this week that the Green Party also screens candidates for their views on abortion and homosexuality and transgenderism and the like, and that if you don't follow the progressive mold, you are kicked out of the party. You're not allowed to run as a candidate. So that's the run-through of all the parties. And then to go back to your question, Joe, about our dust-up or criticism of Andrew Scheer last week, what this was is there was a controversy that was created by his Quebec lieutenant, MP Alan Reyes, who ran around telling conservative candidates in Quebec that the leader in the party would not allow any MP, backbench or cabinet, to bring forward pro-life measures in terms of private members' bills or motions. And when a reporter heard that and questioned Andrew Scheer's office if that was true, if that was the position of the leader, they had to say, no, that is not the position of the leader. We allow private members or backbench MPs to bring forward any issue that's of importance to them and their constituents on issues of conscience, and then the media party, as Ezra Levant likes to call it, went into a frenzy and just orchestrated a hate campaign against Andrew Scheer for the purpose, and together with the Liberal Party, with Ralph Goodale. It was a good setup for Andrew Scheer, and the goal was to put so much pressure to attack him so heavily that he would distance himself from his pro-life beliefs, and they set a trap for him to try to make him sound pro-abortion, even though he has a pro-life voting record as an MP throughout his career and is a practicing Catholic and has always been, in the past, was always rated as pro-life by Campaign Life. The setup here was, let's attack him, make him so scared that he says something to alienate his natural base, the Conservative Party's natural base of pro-life and pro-family people, of small c social conservatives, and so that it becomes a voter suppression tactic, and that's exactly what happened. So Scheer caved to the pressure. He announced, quote, "I will oppose any measures or attempts," end quote, to reopen the abortion debate and to bring forward private members' bills and motions. And that upset a tremendous number of social conservatives, pro-lifers, who like Andrew Scheer because they believed he was pro-life. And so we criticized him for that. We told him that, listen, all you have to do was say that you will respect the democratic right of MPs to bring forward issues that are important to them and to their constituents, and that it is not your place as leader to take away democratic rights from MPs. Otherwise we might as well abolish the MP and just have a leader for each party to rule over everyone, and one prime minister to rule over everyone. And but unfortunately, he got scared. He took bad advice from his people, his communications people, and came out with that statement, which makes it sound like he is in fact going to come down with a hammer on backbench MPs who might want to bring forward pro-life bills, and that he would also pressure other MPs to vote against it. So that's a betrayal of the pro-life ethic. It's a betrayal of the pro-life cause in that sense, and not something that's becoming at all of someone who has put themselves out their entire career to as a pro-life person. So that was in the media a lot, and we're trying to help Andrew Scheer too. I mean, we want him to come back to his previous life position, and give something in terms of policy to social conservatives. This was, as I said, a total voter suppression tactic by the Liberals. They were not going to gain one extra vote by showing their abortion extremism. This was to suppress the conservative vote. That's all it was.
Okay, let me jump in here on this with this whole Andrew Scheer thing, because it seems to me that all he had to say was, guys, that video, because I think you and I have in mind the same video that you are talking about, where he stood up in defense of same-sex marriage, but that was like 19 years ago.
In defense of traditional marriage.
Traditional marriage.
Yeah.
Yes, I had it backwards. My apologies. But what? And maybe people told him this. Maybe they didn't. But just stand up and say, look, that was 15, 20 years ago. Why don't we go over to Trudeau's side and see what he said over the last 15, 20 years, and we'll contrast the two. I'm not apologizing for something I said 15 or 20 years ago. In fact, and if it had been me, I'd have doubled down. I said, not only will I'm not going to bring the issue back, but I'm going to encourage members of my party to, if they feel that this is an issue that matters to their constituents, I'm going to encourage them to bring it forward in their own private members' bills. He didn't have to run away at all. All he had to do was stand up and be a man, and he didn't do that. And that's what really tipped a lot of people off.
Absolutely, he didn't stand by his principles. I mean, he gave a speech in defense of natural marriage in the past. He voted the right way on marriage as an MP on the marriage bills, the various votes. And all he had to do, along the lines of what you said, was to say, listen, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian, I'm not going to apologize for my religious beliefs. That vote happened, and I don't think it is what it is. And that would have got him in a lot less hot water than making it look like he was ashamed of his own principles. Because that's the trap that the liberal media sets for conservative politicians, and it's so rare to find a conservative politician who understands what the media is trying to do to them. And the trap is this: attack, get them to say something that makes it look like they're ashamed of their own beliefs, and then you alienate everybody. You alienate your own base. The mushy middle, who doesn't even care at all about issues like marriage and abortion, etc., they also dislike you because now you look like a smarmy politician who has no principles. So it's a coup by it's a brilliant strategic move by the liberal media, and in this case in coordination with Ralph Goodale and the Liberal Party as well.
All right, with the last couple of minutes we have here for the segment, I want to ask you how would you advise someone who comes to you and says, "Look, I'm pro-life, but I have no idea where to park my vote this coming election." What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, if the person is a supporter or donor of Campaign Life Coalition, they can come to our website and register a private account there for supporters and donors, and they can see our voter guide, and we tell you who your pro-life candidate is in your riding, and you can see who we recommend that you support with your ballot. For others who are not on our database as donors or supporters, and sorry, I should say that our website for those who are supporters or donors is voteprolife.ca. Voteprolife.ca. And so our voter guide resources are there. Unfortunately, because of the third-party advertising law introduced by Trudeau to silence small-c conservative voices, we can no longer make that website available to the public, but our supporters and donors can still access those materials. But for others, if you're not on our database, talk to your candidates in your local riding and ask them where they stand on the issue of the right to life, on euthanasia, on family values, parental rights, and the like, and vote for the candidate that most aligns with your values.
All right. Well, it's we have only just a few seconds left. If you had to look into your crystal ball, where do you think all this is going to fall come the day after the election? Like, what are you hopeful that we can start to see some reversal of the trend of where, conservatives actually are continuously losing because they won't stand up for their principles, or is there going to be a turnaround maybe?
There's still time for Andrew Scheer to turn around, and he's getting competition from Maxime Bernier, who's trying to appeal on free speech and even on the right to life issue, saying he'll allow a vote. So there's a possibility that Scheer will man up and start to appeal to his socially conservative base, so that they get motivated to get out there and get out the vote and recruit members, friends from their church and from their family and their neighbors and workplace to go vote for them. But it's in his hands to do that. I fear that things are starting to slip away. The Conservatives blew the 9-point lead they had over the Liberals just a few months ago due to the SNC-Lavalin scandal that fell into their laps. And that's because of the marginalization of the small-c conservative vote and basically acting like a liberal-like person. And so there's still opportunities for Scheer to give us policies that energize us and make us want to get out there and work for conservative candidates. So it's in Scheer's hands to turn this around and not allow Trudeau to run away with this election. But it's in some polls recently it seems like the Liberals are starting to pull ahead, and I fear we're headed towards another Liberal win.
All right, Jack, I want to thank you very much for joining us this evening. Our guest has been Jack Fonseca, the director for political. I always forget the last word of your title.
Political operations.
Thank you. The director of political operations for the Campaign Life Coalition. He certainly gives us plenty to think about. And again, Jack, thank you for joining us this evening. It has been a very enlightening and interesting conversation.
Okay, my pleasure anytime.
All right. Well, you have a good night. We'll check back in with you again. Good night.
Okay. So that's a full hour, Dick. Another
Where does the
frenetic
time
pace.
go?
Frenetic.
Yes.
I have to work on my enunciation.
Yes. You want a pen?
I have to do your pencil trick, Dick.
Yes.
So listen to our listeners, ladies and gentlemen. Send your comments to comments at thenickandjoeshow.com. That's comments at thenickandjoeshow.com. Don't forget to share us with your friends and family on social media. And you can also listen to past episodes of The Nick and Joe Show, previously The Combat Zone, but we're not that anymore because this is the new, gentler, kinder
yeah.
Nick and Joe Show. But you can catch our podcasts on thinkradio.ca or on your favorite podcast network. And until then, God bless. Have a good week. We will catch you next time here in the Nick and Joe Show.
Good night, all.